Well, it's that time of the morning where we ask a politician a few questions about their election campaigns as we build up to the polls, which are just 2 weeks away. Today, we speak to the newcomers on the block, Rise Mzansi, which was founded in April 2023. The political party grabbed the attention of South Africans with their slogan, 2024 is our 1994. So what hopes do the newcomers have as we lead up to the May 29th polls? The party leader, Songezo Zibi, is joining us now in studio. Songezo, it must be tough. It must be tough campaigning.
It is tough but fulfilling. And
it is
also
tough,
the reception is great as well, so it helps.
It is great, but it helps.
Yeah.
Okay. So the party was founded last year.
Yes.
But there was also the Rivonia Circle. What
Yes.
is the link between Rise Mzansi and the Rivonia Circle outside of people that we've seen that have endorsed, for instance, Rise Mzansi, who are also part of Rivonia Circle?
So Rivonia Circle was where I started, particularly myself. It's a think tank. It's a non-profit company. And what we really wanted to do there was to understand people's attitudes and feelings about the democracy, about politics, how they want to participate in politics, whether they know how to access their rights in this democracy and so on. But also, most importantly, civic participation. It was the learnings from this experience, because Rivonia Circle continues to do that work right across the country. It was a learning from this experience that showed that there is space for a new politics, for a new political organization that does things differently. And it is at that point that I left the Rivonia Circle and co-founded the Rise Mzansi with a different set of people, some of whom we met during the Rivonia Circle's work, admittedly. But the majority now had actually never encountered Rivonia Circle before.
Yeah, and the reason that I asked this question is also in relation to what conversations would have taken place with other people as well to say that, Songezo, I think that there is an opportunity to start a new political party. And also on the basis of that, starting a new political party, of course, you need money to do that and to run campaigns. I remember the last time you had a chat with JJ Tabani and you were speaking about the 99,000 Rand campaign to go below the 100,000 Rand the declaration threshold of the Party Political Funding Act. So what was that conversation? Who said, Songezo, do this?
No, look, I mean, it became clear during the process, the Rivonia Circle process, that there was space. In fact, there is a video on YouTube of a guy called Prince from Johannesburg South. He was the very first person in Rivonia Circle's meetings to say, we need to start a political movement. I remember that date. It was a workshop, 8th October 2022, at Parktown, addressed by Nze Ufo, a grassroots activist from the US. It was literally from that meeting that we decided to then go and explore whether this was a viable idea or not. And that culminated in a bigger meeting of various community and civic organization representatives and just ordinary South Africans, because we issued the invite on Twitter and Facebook and so on. 26 November, I think it was, 2022. And it was there that the Rise movement was born. And we then began the process of trying to form a political organization. And we announced that on the 19th of April. So that really is the thread that went through. Of course, we spoke to various people. We spoke to a lot of ANC veterans, by the way. People that were part of the United Democratic Front, people that were in Defender Democracy, and said, listen, this civic society idea is great, but where you really need to make the difference is in parliament, is in legislatures and so on. But most of them
Care to name a few?
No, I think I've given enough clues with the collective sort of a Defender Democracy that I mentioned. I mean, there are people there that we got into very serious conversations with and said, listen, Defender Democracy is great, but we also think that there is space for a new political organization. But I think, some of them have been around for decades. They're not keen to get back into politics. But these are people we continue to engage with from time to time as South Africans.
Okay. Where did the money come from when you initially started? We're going to get to the Rebecca Oppenheimer element, but where did the money come from when you said that this is now the party that we are going to start. Because even with the Rebecca Oppenheimer, the declaration and the declaration of some of the other donors was something that you volunteered.
Yeah. So we use our own money, by the way. I mean, personally, I've used, a significant amount of my own money, because you have to get around, you have to fly, you have to go and see people about the money and other things. And in the early stages, you actually just don't get the money. Our very first donor has a business on Vilakazi Street in Soweto, and he gave us 15,000 bucks. And that was the first money that went into our bank account as a political organization, and it allowed us to start doing the basics, basically, and getting going. The second thing that we did was to speak to people about small donations. So we have hundreds of people who give us recurring donations of 1,000 rand, 2,000 rand, and so on. And these are the people that sustain the work that we did. So in the beginning, that's kind of the money that we had. We also had people who gave 99,000 bucks. People who could have given $1 million, by the way, but weren't sure. And then we do have a couple of people who gave well over 100,000 rand. We were not a political organization then. We're just a voluntary organization. That's really what enabled us to have a launch. Yeah. And once we had the launch and we were in the media and so on, became a lot less difficult to tell people, this is who we are, this is what we represent, because they could Google and find us.
So how does Rebecca Oppenheimer then come into the picture? 15 million rand, the lump sum. I'm sure this is the largest donations that you've seen, that you've received since the launch of Rise Mzansi.
So I was at the News 24 event in Cape Town, on stage with Herman, John Steenhuisen, and Musi. And I wasn't aware of this, but she was sitting in the audience. And the conversation actually typically became chaotic between Herman and John, as it happens. And at some point, I then said that if the two of them can't demonstrate the maturity that's required to govern outside of the ANC, then voters are not going to have the confidence that the opposition has, what it takes to govern. And apparently she noted this comment and how, like, I showed up and spoke about Rise Mzansi in the conversation. A mutual friend introduced us and we had 2-3 conversations. We spoke about what we want to do in this election, what we want to do for the long term, what our vision is, what our politics is, and that if she's happy to support a startup organization, then we'd be very happy. And she said, fine, I'll support you. Yeah. Because at the time, she wasn't actually donating to the DA anymore. She said she had taken a decision not to. And so we're kind of lucky. We kind of got into a gap where she wasn't committed elsewhere and the moment was right and that coincidence worked. Yeah.
Has there any more money that have come through from her?
Oh, yeah. Not from her.
From her specifically?
Not yet, but we are expecting that she will support us again, because this was for the previous financial year. This is now a new financial year, so but we are expecting that she will support us again. As are some of the donors, by the way, that we've already declared as well. They also supporting us on a multi-year basis, but we've also been fortunate to get other donors that are going to be declared when the IEC comes up.
Okay, how much have you raised so far?
Off the top of my head, I would say, I think declarable, I would say maybe in 40 million.
40 million. Is that cumulative of the 17 million?
It's cumulative of the?
17 million.
Yeah, it's cumulative. No, it's cumulative.
Okay.
I mean, the rest are really small donations. Currently, we have what we call a debit order derby. And the debit order derby is that all Rise Mzansi members are recruiting other people to sign up for debit orders. And we've got an internal ranking system where, we compete on who's able to secure the most amount of debit orders. Yeah. I mean, that's how you fundraise. How else do you do it?
Running a political party and campaigning can be very expensive. We continue the conversation with the Rise Mzansi leader, Songezo Zibi. And as you know, of course, we also have Ask a Politician, where we ask our viewers to ask a politician any question, and that coming up after the short break. And we continue our conversation with Rise Mzansi leader Songezo Zibi, who's joining us in studio. I just want to quickly wrap up the conversation from what we started earlier on before the headlines. Rebecca, first of all, when you had a conversation with Rebecca, did you say to her that, listen, while you are donating to the party, these are the limitations that we have in terms of trying to protect the interests of the party and ensure that the party is not influenced by outsiders?
In fact, Aldrin, when we set out on April 19, the most important document that we published is called Our Politics. It's on our website and people can find it on risemzansi.org. The very first section in that document says ideological declaration. It says what we stand for. Anybody who believes that the principles set out in that ideological declaration and in our politics document has to decide whether they're comfortable or not with those principles. If they are, then they can assist us with funding or any other sort of help. If they're not, they move on and go somewhere else. Some may have seen in the city press, there's an article that says we turn down money on principle. We were asked to join the Moonshot Pact as a condition of funding, and we said no. We'd have billboards right now and this kind of thing, like the Moonshot political parties have got between that and government money. We don't, because we said no to that money. So we don't exchange for policy, our donations. Besides, we've got far too many donors to try and please all of them. We can't, because while for Rebecca 15 million is an amount of money that she can manage, the person who gives us 150,000 rand, that's a lot of money to them. Yeah. And they're entitled to as much. Then now, if you're trying to please 800 masters, you're not going to win.
Okay. Then, of course, yesterday we saw you trending again, and this is in relation to the...
Oh, was I trending?
Yes. No, Songezo Zibi was trending. And this is in relation, of course, to your previous role at the Open Society Foundation.
Yes. No, in fact, I mean...
do you know why it wasn't included in your profile?
No. I don't know why it wasn't. I mean, what do you mean? It's on my LinkedIn profile.
Yeah.
That's where this person found it. It's still there. It's no secret at all. I'm, in fact, very proud of the work that the Open Society Foundation of South Africa has done over the years. It was one of the very first philanthropies to come to South Africa after the unbanning of political organizations in South Africa. It does incredible work. Some of the organizations that people see doing work in poor communities, fighting for gender equality, supporting court cases by really poor South Africans who want to access their rights, those were partly funded by the Open Society Foundation, when they otherwise wouldn't have the means to do so.
But from a political perspective, though, do you understand why that is that apprehension?
No, I don't.
George Soros, for instance, who has been accused of pushing regime change, is the founder of the Open Society, right? Open Society Foundation.
There is an anti-Semitic trope, Aldrin, that all of us need to be careful of, which is that because George Soros is wealthy and is Jewish, then he's trying to exert his influence all over the world. When I went into the Open Society Foundation, I was quite clear. I'm a very independent-minded person. And there is no way at Open Society Foundation where it was said that we need to fund organizations, that we need to approve grant applications by organizations that want to effect regime change. In fact, I challenge people to just Google the annual reports of Open Society Foundation South Africa. They will see each year a list of organizations that receive funds from the Open Society Foundation. People must get out of this conspiratorial mindset about everything, right? And Open Society Foundation has nothing to do with Rise Mzansi. I have served on more than one non-profit organization in South Africa, and I made that choice not to serve on commercial boards, even though I was in business.
But the Indian government, for instance, had accused George Soros of trying to push regime change. So there are those allegations and accusations that are out there, right?
What does that have to do with South Africa? Is he trying to push regime change in South Africa?
And you see, that's the thing about it. It's that particular apprehension that people might bring in and try to make this link. And maybe there is no particular link at all. And as you say now, that there is no link even between the Open Foundation Society South Africa as well as Rise Mzansi. No. But you understand where the apprehension is coming from.
But Aldrin, who else gives to organizations in South Africa that people don't have an apprehension about, right? Because the Open Society Foundation is not the only philanthropy that gives to grassroots organizations like Abahlali Basem Jondolo and so on, right? Now, if somebody wants to say these organizations, the Uyinene Mkhwetyana Foundation and so on, are trying to push regime change, People need to stop living in the clouds, Aldrin, right? That the Indian government believes that George Soros or whoever is trying to push regime change, what we have seen is that anti-democratic governments across the world, guess who says this over here? Narendra Modi says that. Viktor Orban in Hungary says that. Right-wing leader, you've got a series of right-wing leaders. This is generally a white or right-wing trope that gets said, which is partly an anti-Semitic trope, and we need to be careful about it.
Okay, let's quickly go into some of your policy proposals. 3 years wealth tax to raise around 300 billion rand. How do you expect to do that? And why only 3 years?
No, it's reviewable every 3 years.
Okay, so how does it work?
It's reviewable every 3 years. It's 1.5% on, and usually this is equity wealth. So if somebody owns, shares and other forms of investment, it's a tax that is levied on those kind of savings. Because the reality, Aldrin, is that we have exhausted our income tax pool. There aren't enough South Africans who are paying income tax, and even the people that we think are wealthy, let's say people who earn 800,000-900,000 rand a month, they're supporting 10, 11 people, what we call black tax for black people. So you can't go and tax those people in a high-cost scenario, but there is a strata of South Africans who are doing really well, right?
Yeah.
And we need to dip.
And you've you've met some of them.
Yes, we need to dip into that so that we can fund our social and development goals.
The NHI bill, tomorrow the president is expected to sign it. Where does Rise Mzansi stand with regards to universal healthcare access and also the NHI bill specifically for South Africa?
So I'm glad you've asked the question that way, Aldrin, because it's important. We must separate the NHI from the principle of universal access to healthcare, because we support universal access to healthcare. What does that look like? What it looks like, Aldrin, is that the state becomes the primary and biggest provider of health services in South Africa. And those health services are as good as they are in the private sector. And they must be within 15 minutes ride of every home in South Africa, right? That's important. The second point is every South African, regardless of whether they've got medical aid or not, has got to have access to specialized care, right? So you can't be denied seeing a urologist or this kind of thing, or have to wait 6 or 7 months without seeing a urologist because you do not have medical aid and so on. So we subscribe to that principle. What South Africans must not be naive about is what this NHI is supposedly going to solve. What it is not going to solve is a lack of an adequate health facility in my community in Mnganduli, with Zitulele Hospital being 45 kilometers in the opposite direction on a gravel road, and it takes you 2 hours to get there. And then once you get there, you get referred to Nelson Mandela Academic Hospital, 150 kilometers in the other direction, and you die on the way. And you know what? In between, Aldrin, 0 public health facilities. So you might have the NHI in place, but you still die anyway. It might work for somebody who lives in the Joburg Metro and that kind of thing, sure.
With a short radius to that hospital.
With a short radius to a private healthcare facility. But Aldrin, where I come from, there is only one private hospital in the entire former Transkei. Where are people going to go? How does the NHI help them?
Speaking about that, let's quickly get these voxes. These are now from some of our viewers. Some questions that we have for you, Songezo.
Yeah.
Utla ke bona ra tlhaloganya ra utla re gona di vote tse di tlang gona nang ka bo di 29 gona na re ra wisha le na support e ntle re wishang gore re ka bona gona le tswelo pele, especially a monoto se ba gaetso, because of re na le mathata le tse rena on behalf of transport. Ha gona order and ne re wisha gore ono ka re motlopo mokgatlo tlong go tsena o nne le support mo go rona le rona re khone go bona ro supporta ka tseleng yang.
His answer to public transport?
In fact, it falls under our spatial planning and spatial justice strata. It also falls under what we're going to announce today on job creation. So we've proposed a significant investment. That's part of where this 300 billion is going to go, Aldrin, towards investing in local and regional infrastructure, particularly network infrastructure, which includes road and rail. Because if we do not do that, our roads remain unsafe, people continue to be in unsafe taxis, spend too much on transport instead of spending it on food and so on. And the viewer is correct. Roads are unsafe. The rail system is unsafe and nearly non-existent in many, many areas. And we believe that we need to reinvest in that, put cars on the road, put cargo on rail, and make sure that there's public transport owned by the government. Taxis are not public transport, Aldrin. They are privately owned services that serve the underserviced public.
I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. But some people look at taxis and like, no, it's public transport because it is open to the public, but it's not. I totally agree with you on that one. Here's another one from our viewers.
Because youth there rona ha re tshwana le youth eno yana. Youth ke di drugs fela. Le tswelopele ha iyo. And nna ha ke bone go bereka ha ke bone tswelopele ga berekiwa sepe di score di fed up.
Education, but I want to link the education one to your proposal as well of overhauling vocational training, in-service training into vocational education for grade 9. Speak to us about that.
So, Aldrin, please allow me to follow what the viewer said, because it is spot on. This is what we experience, and it talks to even the issues that you're saying in your question. So, 90% of unemployed South Africans either have matric or no matric at all. 90%. Between 88 and 92%, depending on which quarter it is. For the last 30 quarters, that has been the statistic. So we are proposing two things. One, providing training now for up to 1 million young South Africans in 5 years, whether they've got matric or not, so that they have got a certificate with which they can go and find work. The second thing is we're proposing for those who've gone through this program, a job seekers grant, so that people have got bus fare, taxi fare, they can fax documents.
But what's
and that
the use of a job seekers grant when the industry is not creating the jobs?
No, hang on. But remember, we're talking about 300 billion, Alton. That is going to go into network infrastructure, roads, water, internet, and so on. Those are job opportunities already that young people can go into sustainable living wage jobs, not expanded public works jobs. We're also proposing, Aldrin, because we need to turn this crisis into an opportunity. We say South Africa should commit to putting solar panels on every roof in South Africa. If we do that, we electrify with solar over 20 million homes. We get off the reliance on the grid, relieve the pressure on Eskom, and create hundreds of community-based businesses to do the work.
Where are those solars coming from? China again?
This is a beauty thing. You know, Aldrin, we've been fighting over that $6.5 billion that the rich countries committed. It's still not used even now. Why can't we insist on using $3 billion of that? That is 62 billion rand. On building solar capacity in the country. We're in the BRICS with China. They're the leaders in solar technology. Germany is one of our largest trading partners. They're the leaders in solar technology. What's difficult?
Why not?
That's why we need new leaders.
Okay. I want to end up on this one. It's a Daily Maverick article, of course, reflecting on your book, The Manifesto. I'm prepared to lead, for I know there will be no anointed Messiah at any point in the future. This includes running for president, and that's what you're doing, right? Is Songezo available to be president of the country through a coalition?
I think, Aldrin, anybody who leads a political party that is going to parliament, who is not prepared to take on the big job, then maybe they shouldn't be doing it.
Coalition?
Otherwise, no, of course.
Potential coalition partners?
You know what, Aldrin? We're going into 3 or so electoral cycles where there's going to be a coalition government in South Africa. It's a fact of life, right? Our principles around the coalition is that no protection of corrupt people, either from before or ongoing, no enabling of corruption. It's really important that once we strike a coalition agreement, we stick to it for 5 years, because this up and down, in and out is really freaking voters out, and we shouldn't do it. Otherwise, for us, ideology, while it is important, it's not a deal breaker. Otherwise, the EFF would not have enabled the DA mayor in Ekurhuleni or Nelson Mandela and so on. Voters give you what they give you. You then need to make pragmatic, ethical decisions post-elections on behalf of the South African people.
Is Rise Mzansi willing to work with the ANC on that coalition?
if the ANC meets these demands that I've just stated, but I don't know how they're going to handle Phala and the prosecution that needs to come from there, for instance, because it means their president cannot be in government.
Songezo Zibi there. Thank you so much. He's the leader of Rise Mzansi. That brings us to the end of this morning's Ask a Politician.